So if the first discipline of a healthy organization is to build a cohesive leadership team, the second one that has to happen concurrently is really to create clarity among that leadership team. And that means to answer and be in agreement around 6 questions that are critical to defining an organization. I'm going to go through those 6 right now. So the first question an organization has to ask is, why do we exist? Why do we exist at the highest, most idealistic level? You know, one of the problems in organizations is we have these things called mission statements where we try to combine the tactics of our business with our values, with the most idealistic reason that we exist. And then it becomes this mishmash that means nothing to anyone. So what we like to say to organizations is, the first question is, why does it matter that your organization exists at all? And there's no limit to how you answer this as long as it's idealistic and true. Some organizations exist to change the world in science. Some exist to provide jobs to people in a local community. Others exist to solve a problem that's been around for a long time. Some exist because we just want to have fun. And no answer is wrong. What we have to do is go back and say, why was this place founded and what's still true about it? Because every organization needs to know why it exists, because at the end of the day, this is not something we want to violate. And it helps to know, how do we hire people that share our passion for that existence? So churches are very easy. Why do we exist? Some organizations, they say, gosh, we got to really go back into our past and ask ourselves, why did we do this in the first place? So that's the first question. Why do we exist? That usually doesn't take too long to answer for most leadership teams. The second question is really important. It's called, how do we behave? Now, really, what this gets at is what we would call your core values are. What are those 2 or 3 behavioral qualities or values that we're not going to tolerate deviations from those? In other words, we're not going to hire anyone or make a decision that would require people to behave differently than we want them to behave. And that's why there needs to be 2 or 3 of these things. Because if you have too many, you're not going to find anybody that has all of those. But the best organizations know that there's just a few things that every single employee, from the top to the bottom, out with customers or in the office, they all have a similar desire to behave in a certain way. And it allows you to manage better, to hire better, to reward better, to correct better, to train better. Without these, an organization doesn't really have a culture. Now, these first 2 are critical because they really define an organization. The third one, though, becomes important, and it doesn't change very often, but it's really critical, and that is, what do we do? Now, here's where we go from the idealistic reason why a company exists to the practical, tangible things it actually does day to day. What business are we in? Do we make tables? Do we design software? Do we run a bank? And I know it's like that should be obvious, right? And for some organizations, this takes 30 seconds. But there are other organizations that are kind of confused because they do so many different things, they're not really sure what the essence is. For instance, are we a service business? Or are we a product business? And some will say, well, we do both, but let's get clear and make sure everybody's aligned around which of those is truly what we do. Okay? The fourth question is really difficult to answer, but really important and fun. And I couldn't possibly go into all the detail here, but it really is, how will we succeed? Another way to say this is, what is our strategy? But the word strategy gets used for so many different things, from tactics to vision to strategy. And so we said, really what the question is, how are we going to be successful? And what that comes down to is being very intentional and differentiating ourselves from our competitors. Okay? And so there's a process that we take people through around picking your strategic anchors. And what it does is it creates clarity around how we're going to make decisions. Because if you have a strategy, if you know how you will succeed intentionally, a big decision comes up and the first thing you should do is say, well, let's review that decision in light of our strategy, how we're going to succeed. And then the answers become clearer. Well, would that fit within how we're going to succeed? If not, it's probably not the right thing to do. This allows you to empower your employees who, if they understand your strategy, they can act on their own, knowing that they're being consistent with the organization. Okay, the fifth question becomes, what is most important? And I like to say right now. And this is about establishing a very clear priority for the organization in a given point in time. It might be for the next 3 months or 6 months, maybe 9 months, but are we all aligned around the single biggest priority in the organization? And then you have to parse that out by, well, if that's the biggest priority across the leadership team, what specific things do we have to do to get there? And how are we going to go about working in a way that moves toward that priority? What is most important? It's called coming up with a rallying cry or a thematic goal that unites everybody on the leadership team and make sure we are rowing in the same direction. The sixth question, the final question is, who must do what? Okay, now that we've agreed on these 5 things, how do we leave here and parse this out so we know what our responsibilities are? That doesn't mean we're going to go work in silos, but there has to be ownership and clarity around the people sitting around that table. Who's going to go and be accountable for doing what? Those are the 6 critical questions. Ultimately, they're not that difficult, but they require discipline and persistence about making sure that everybody on the around the table on the team is clear and in agreement moving forward.